It's good to be home. You remember, this is the place I filmed my Die Hard review 2 years ago. This year, I uploaded only 3 videos, which is pretty bad, especially since I'm considering taking down one of those videos. But, no matter how infrequently I upload, there's still a few traditions I'll always love. There's my Blu-ray editions, which have gone from monthly to yearly. There's ranking all the new movies of the year before the Oscars. And of course, my favorite, my Christmas movie masterpieces. Aside from the fact that I genuinely enjoy doing these kinds of video essays, I also get a lot of views from these videos, which inflates my ego enough to make me the pompous jackass I am for the rest of the year. With the Christmas movie masterpieces, I've noticed that ever since I did the Shop Around the Corner, I usually alternate between a serious episode one year to a lighter episode the next year to a serious episode again the next year. And I never planned it like this. It just sort of turned out that way over the past 3 years. So with the Holdovers review last year, I'm due for a lighter episode, which is, it's good because it's been a pretty tough year for me anyways, and everyone's exhausted from living through the world-changing events every other day of 2024. So even though I kind of wanted to do It's a Wonderful Life, I decided to let it marinate for another year so I could make a more succinct review sometime in the near future. So I decided to go with a film that always holds up as a comfort movie around Christmas time. The 5th annual Christmas movie masterpiece is Love Actually. Love Actually was directed by Richard Curtis and stars Liam Neeson, Keira Knightley, Alan Rickman, Hugh Grant, Emma Thompson, Colin Firth, Andrew Lincoln, Bill Nighy, Mr. Bean for some reason, and just a lot of British actors, all as people whose lives are somehow interconnected as they try to search for love and meaning and deal with their relationships in the weeks leading up to Christmas. In a year like this, filled with warfare, hatred, turmoil, division, and the release and discontinuation of Baskin-Robbins' best ice cream flavor in years, there's a great comfort to the opening of this film.
Whenever I get gloomy with the state of the world, I think about the arrivals gate at Heathrow Airport. General opinion's starting to make out that we live in a world of hatred and greed. But I don't see that. Seems to me that love is everywhere. Often it's not particularly dignified or newsworthy, but it's always there. Fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, husbands and wives, boyfriends, girlfriends, old friends. When the planes hit the Twin Towers, as far as I know, none of the phone calls from the people on board were messages of hate or revenge. They were all messages of love. If you look for it, I've got a sneaky feeling you'll find that love actually is all around.
Which distinguishes this from a lot of lesser Christmas rom-coms. Love Hard. 4 Christmases. Every Netflix Christmas movie ever. Except Klaus, that movie rocks. My bad, guys, I'm not feeling well. Anyways, Love Actually doesn't show love as just a festivity that happens to fit the aesthetic of the holiday season, but it portrays love as a unifying feature of humanity, bringing happiness and joy just in time for the happiest season of all. Yeah, it does sound corny, but that's sort of the charm of this movie.
I'm a little relieved.
Why?
But because I thought it would be something worse.
Worse than the total agony of being in love.
No, you're right. Yeah, total agony.
I love films like this which feature ensemble casts and intertwining stories that all fall under a common theme, and they feel so grand. Incidentally, another famous film that did exactly this came out around the same time as Love Actually, which was 2004's Crash. Except while Crash focuses on racism as a result of collective unkindness, Love Actually is a good movie that makes sense. But this is such a satisfying movie to watch because of how much fun it is to see who knows who and how everyone in their love lives have an effect on everyone else. Along with that, like we were talking about earlier, it really gives you that sense of Christmas time unity and togetherness that makes you feel all, good inside and gives you the urge to go out and spread that love and joy among your fellow man. Because of all the interlinked stories in this film, there's such a diverse array of emotions and a great variety of character development and charm to experience within the runtime. There's rich and complex arcs like Emma Thompson, who begins to realize her husband's infidelity, and there's, simple and hilarious bits like the ugly Englishman, who plans to go to the US to use his cute British accent to his advantage on our fabled surplus of gorgeous American women. I think of all the stories in here, my favorites are Liam Neeson's, where he plays a widower who helps his stepson with a crush at school, and this story is just absolutely adorable and wholesome, and it's a great father-son story. And I really like Colin Firth's story, where he plays a writer who begins to fall in love with a Portuguese immigrant who can't speak any English. I think this one is by far the most romantic story of the whole film, and it's just really funny. I also like Bill Nighy's story, where he plays a fading pop star who knows his new Christmas album is a total piece of trash, but tries anyways to convince everyone to make it the #1 best-selling album by Christmas. But the reason I like this story is partly because I absolutely adore Bill Nighy, but that story is absolutely hilarious, and Bill Nighy's character in it is by far my favorite character in the whole movie. What makes Love Actually such a great film is that oftentimes films like this with a lot of main characters and so many focal points can often dilute the depths the film can dive into its characters as they share screen time. It's like how if you stared at a person while you were right across from them, you would be able to point out every mark or every pimple on their face. But if you looked at that same person across a crowded room, you back up further, you add more people, you try to get more into that same mount, into that same view, you wouldn't be able to point out nearly as much detail. Do you sort of see what I'm getting at here? Love Actually, on the other hand, for the most part, does really well at fleshing out a lot of its characters in just a bit over 2 hours. Every single character feels so full of life and emotion, as if we were really getting to peek into the lives of a myriad of people over the course of a few weeks. Of course, though, in the process of fleshing out all these fascinating characters, some stories do become a bit unnecessary or even underdeveloped in some cases. For example, Laura Linney has this storyline where she wants to fall in love with a guy at work, but she also has to care for her brother, who's not all there mentally and is very codependent. And this definitely had the possibility to hit a very dramatic note that ties in well to the themes of the movie. But by the third act, this gets almost completely sidelined. And Martin Freeman's story, where he's an actor who's falling for a woman with whom he's filming a sex scene, definitely feels like it could have been cut, especially since the first time I saw this movie was with my dad, and the second time was last week on a date. So that was pretty uncomfortable. But seriously though, it does feel like this particular story doesn't really go anywhere or even carry much weight in the overall movie. It's just good comic relief that gets shoehorned in between scenes. Overall, Love Actually is one of the most fun Christmas movies in years. While it might not get my highest grade of an A+, it most certainly deserves its title as a Christmas movie masterpiece. It really seems like a lot of Hugh Grant's roles, Love Actually included, are exactly the same. If you like that, I would recommend Notting Hill, Four Weddings and a Funeral, or About a Boy. And if you hate that and would rather see him play anything other than the love-struck dork who convinces himself he'll never be good enough, then I would recommend this year's Heretic, a movie I didn't completely love, but I will admit his performance in it was definitely solid. The director of Love Actually, Richard Curtis, also has another really great rom-com called About Time, which was released about 10 years after this, and I would definitely recommend it. It's very unconventional, but it still works so well, and it's a great feel-good movie that hits a lot of the same emotional marks as Love Actually. One set of films I feel encapsulates the idea of Love Actually very well is Richard Linklater's Before trilogy, which follows two people and their romance over the course of 18 years after one fateful meeting on a train in Vienna. It's a great trilogy, it's one of my favorites, and they're some of the most well-written films of all time. If you like these types of films where there's all these intertwining stories and they all come together, so do I! These are called mosaic films. Of course, there's extremely popular films that do this, like Magnolia and Pulp Fiction, which, if you haven't seen them, you need to get on that. There's also a lot of mosaic films that I really wish more people knew about. Some of them include Amores Perros, Babel, Shortcuts, Snatch, and my favorite of them all, Nashville. And finally, we're going to do a lightning round. If there were any particular stories in this movie you especially liked, I'm going to give you recommendations for all of them. If you liked Andrew Lincoln and Keira Knightley's story, I would recommend Broadcast News, Jules and Jim, and Past Lives. If you liked Laura Linney's story, I would recommend Punch Drunk Love, A Fire, and A Woman Under the Influence. If you liked Liam Neeson and Thomas Brody Sangster's story, I would recommend Cinema Paradiso, Come On, and The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. If you liked Martin Freeman and Joanna Page's story, I would recommend Matthias and Maxime and Y Tu Mama Tambien. If you liked Alan Rickman and Emma Thompson's story, I would recommend Chilly Scenes of Winter, Vicky Cristina Barcelona, The Earrings of Madame de, and The Graduate. If you liked Colin Firth's story, I would recommend Drive My Car and Fallen Leaves. If you liked Hugh Grant's story, I would recommend The American President and Marty. And finally, if you liked Bill Nighy's story, I would recommend All That Jazz, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, and Birdman. Well, that's going to wrap up our Christmas season this year. Before you leave, why don't you tell me what Christmas movie you're going to be watching this year? For me, I'm going to try and squeeze in a few. I'm going to try and get Die Hard, A Christmas Story, It's a Wonderful Life, and The Holdovers. I'm probably not going to have time for all of them, but, I'm hoping to get at least some done. It's fun. Anyway, after you tell me about that, you can head on out. Stay safe and watch good movies. Merry Christmas.